going to review one of the all-time great Doctor Who stories. So you know, we've already reviewed it anyway. One of the great stories, Caves of Androzani.
We've got some great artwork there from Best Doctor Who.
First of all, we need to find our way to the TARDIS.
Now, I've only watched the original release, but you've got the...
I've got both releases. I mean,
yeah.
it was very interesting, Caves of Androzani. It was one of the first Doctor Who stories released on DVD.
Yeah.
Quite understandably. What has happened recently is 2Entertain has actually gone back to some of the older releases which didn't have many extras, and the restoration on the episode wasn't as good as it could have been.
Okay, because I've noticed. I mean, I noticed actually there was quite a lot of sort of video lines.
Well, one of the big causes that they can only do so much. One of the big causes of video lines is when they were shooting those submachine guns, and they do their best on it, but you can't unfortunately get rid of it completely. The first Revisitations box set, if you are just starting out and buying Doctor Who DVDs, it's probably one of the best box sets to get. You've got Caves of Androzani on it.
Yeah.
You've got Talons of Wang Chian, and you've got Doctor Who the movie with some spectacular extras on it. It's literally is just the best value for money for Doctor Who fans. Caves of Androzani regularly. I mean, I don't think you can say what's the best Doctor Who story, simply because it's very much a matter of Doctor Who. It covers so many styles.
Yeah.
You get comedic episodes, you get very gothic episodes, you get some action episodes.
I mean, this episode was voted in 2009 in Doctor Who magazine by readers as the best Doctor Who story.
Oh yeah, but I was simply going to say it's always within the top 10 all-time greats. But the previous Doctor Who poll, it was Genesis of the Daleks.
Well, there is.
One.
I mean, I suppose there's also a generational thing as well.
Yeah, but I think you're going to have. I don't want to even hear about lost stories, because memory can cheat. So, I would love to be able to sit down and watch Evil of the Daleks or something like that and see if it's as good as the script pertains to it being. And why is it one of the best? It's because it was written by Robert Holmes.
Well, indeed.
And I bang about that but Robert Holmes, to this day, is the best writer they ever had on the show.
In the story, it does feel like Doctor Who from the 1970s.
It feels like almost no other Doctor Who to me, because there's almost no humour in it. It's very, very serious. The characters he's dealing with are probably some of the most dangerous characters he's ever dealt with. When you look at some of the other times that have mercenaries in it, compared to what he was up against in this, it's a very, very dangerous feeling story. And it's got an amazing cast by it. Christopher Gable as Sharos Jek. He's just one of those villains. He's like one of those villains that reminds me of like in Marvel Comics, where you've got like Magneto or Doctor Doom, where you've got this villain who's the bad guy, but you actually kind of sympathise with him.
Well, that's the thing. This is what I was about to say. I mean, Robert Holmes was a writer, obviously, in the Gothic phase.
Yes.
Of Doctor Who.
Oh, and this is very much Phantom of the Opera.
And it's Phantom of the Opera.
Yes.
You've even got his mask being very Phantom of the Opera, and of course Peri becomes.
Yes.
He has to go and kidnap Peri, much like the Phantoms.
But it's the same with what's happened to Sharos Jek. He's a bad guy, but you have some sympathy for him, and you almost feel like, given different circumstances from the moment they meet, he feels a kinship with the Doctor. He doesn't really want to harm him, and he feels like he can have some kind of
they're both outside
rapport with him.
Yes, but they're united by their love of science.
Yes. The other thing about it is it was directed by Graham Harper.
Yes, of
who's
course.
the one person who's moved on from classic Doctor Who to work on, and he became one of the top directors on new Doctor Who.
Indeed, yeah.
And he actually has this style that's very different from a lot of the other directors who work on the show. It's mostly in his lighting, in that he really does get this very dark atmospheric feel to his
It is a
work.
very atmospheric story. I mean, it is. If you haven't got the DVD of this one, do go out and get it.
It was a bit sad on Peter Davison that he did his first 2 years on Doctor Who, and just the way the contracting was done, they needed an answer towards the second season of whether he was going to stay on and leave. And he had been advised by Patrick Troughton to just do 3 years. which I disagree with. I think you need a good 4 to 5 years to
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
And Peter Davison had felt that his scripts in his second year weren't very good, so he decided to leave. And then he says, by the time he got to his third year and he saw the scripts that were coming in, he actually suddenly felt very sorry he was leaving and actually wished he could have stayed on a bit longer.
Absolutely.
And I felt that at this point he's really coming into his own. I think he needed another season as Doctor to really establish himself.
Because Peter Davison's era is really is defined by the fact that there was such a large TARDIS crew. I mean,
Yes.
he had 3 companions at one point, and suddenly going right back to basics here, and it's just him and Peri, and they work so well together. You think, you know, she gets introduced only in the story before in Planet of Fire, and they're just such a great couple. I mean, it would be really interesting to have seen more of Peter Davison with only one companion. You know, and
that actually brings us on to the regeneration itself.
yes, which we do.
And I actually think this is one of the best regenerations that they ever did on the show visually.
What was it you always told me, Doctor? Braveheart?
You must survive. Many of your enemies would delight in your death, Doctor.
Braveheart? You're needed. You mustn't die, Doctor.
Many of your enemies would delight in your death. You know
You're
that.
needed. You mustn't die, Doctor.
You know that.
Adric?
You know that.
You mustn't die, Doctor.
No, my dear Doctor, you must die. Die, Doctor. Die, Doctor.
Doctor?
You're expecting someone else?
That's some fantastic piece of television that is there. I mean, I really do think that regeneration sequence is one of the best, not just regeneration sequence, but one of the best sequences in Doctor Who's history.
Peri. I mean, Peri. It would have been really interesting to see more of Peri and the Fifth Doctor, because it's like, you know, she comes in and has this great story with the Fifth Doctor, and then suddenly she's put with Colin Baker, who is so different. He's such a cold Doctor compared to the warmth of Peter Davison.
Well, one thing I just wanted to go onto this regeneration as well is what I really liked about this is there's something I liked about what they did with story-wise with this and with Tom Baker's regeneration and with John Pertwee's regeneration, where the Doctor, in terms of that Doctor dying, actually makes a, you know, they're not killed or forcibly changed by the Time Lords or something, but actually has to make a heroic choice to sacrifice themselves.
Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of people are assuming this is only a Russell T Davies creation.
Yes.
That he has to be this.
I actually, I mean, I felt there was a huge difference between, and it just showed you something so much better here. The Doctor has to save Peri.
Yes.
And at no point, there's only enough antidote to save one of them. And at no point does the Doctor question it, no point does the Doctor hesitate. He just gives Peri the antidote straight away. And Peri's like, is there enough for you? And he just accepts it. I had to, you know, it never would have occurred to the Doctor to, you know, think about himself. He was thinking about others first. Whereas when David Tennant had to save Bernard Cribbins, he starts whinging and crying for 5 minutes while he's in the radiation capsule. And I actually felt it was a bit embarrassing and kind of unheroic.
Because he knows he can't die.
Yeah.
He's just
But it was just
live.
like he starts going on
He's
and
gonna
on.
live again.
And I was a bit kind of like, oh, it was a bit cringeworthy that.
Yeah,
Whereas this, I just felt it just really was one of the best regenerations that they had. And, you know, it just tops off what's otherwise a really fantastic story.
Let down by another sort of rubbery-looking monster.
Yes, the Magma Beast. Yes, that's
Which
kind of like
plagues poor old Peter Davison.
that's kind of like quietly forgotten. The one thing you've got
It's
to
kind of
give it though is that Graham Harper
the thing is,
realised it was rubbish and kind of like shot it in bad light.
But it's like, was it even needed, really?
I think they needed a threat down there, but yeah, I mean,
it just seemed to be like, let's throw in a monster because we have to have a monster.
yes.
But you don't always need to have a monster, because sometimes the worst monsters are the humans themselves. You know?
Yeah, well, definitely in this story.
Yeah. Hubian Moore says, what I like is Peri is this random stranger who he just met in the last episode, and he is risking his life for this stranger. That's heroic in my eyes.
That's what the Doctor is. I always get the impression the Doctor is the kind of person who would risk his life for anybody.
Caves of Androzani, it is a great DVD. I think you should definitely get this. If you don't have it in your collection already.
Well, I would have assumed everybody who's watching this has got them all in their collection anyway.
It seems to be from the chat room. Everyone seems to have seen this one, so that's good.
You cannot be a Doctor Who fan and not have seen the Caves of Androzani.
Well, you can if you've only introduced the Doctor in 2005.
Yeah, well, if you're a new Doctor, but if you're a new Doctor Who fan, if somebody once asked me this on a message board, they said they were a new Doctor Who fan. Could I recommend them some stories? And then he said I recommended them more stories than there had actually been in new Doctor Who. So, Caves of Androzani is definitely one that I would recommend to anybody. And if somebody's a new fan of Doctor Who, only seen David Tennant and Matt Smith, you know, definitely one I'd recommend to them, along with something like City of Death, or The Pyramids of Mars, or Remembrance of the Daleks. Something along those, a really good story.
And of course, all of Peter Davison and all of Colin Baker are now available.
Yes.
So you can actually watch them in order now.
Yeah.
Instead of the random order that they get released in.